News of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue flying high on a farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his...
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Sit back and relax. We have a fabulous Thanksgiving special lined up for you. You're going to hear from some really intriguing voices across America. First, I want to just say that I want to point everybody out to my the latest article that I wrote on worldtribune.com. It's called "It's Come Time for This, Time to Impeach Emperor Obama." Time to impeach Emperor Obama. I lay out the case as to why I believe that we must take a stand against the president's executive amnesty. There are so many problems with his executive amnesty, which we did address last week in quite a lot of detail. But I want to point out two other factors. One is we are now seeing that Hispanics themselves are saying, A, this whole thing doesn't go far enough for them, and B, they fear that they may be left high and dry. And why is that? Well, the problem with an executive order is that once it is issued by a president, it can also be rescinded. And so if you look at it from the point of view of the illegals, is it really in their interest to come out of the shadows? And then what? In 3 years from now, what if the next president says, we reject this executive amnesty? Now they've come out of the shadows and the government knows their names, their numbers, their phone numbers, their addresses. It knows exactly who they are, where they live. And if the next president wants to, he can deport them. So we're hearing from Hispanics that it's not far enough, and also it leaves them with a sense of insecurity. Although some are jubilant, there are others who are raising concerns, and rightfully so. But also, this is what I've been talking about for the longest time. If we really want to take a stand against President Barack Obama, we need to convince African Americans that his policies run contrary to their interests. This executive order in particular has riled many black activists who feel betrayed by the president's actions. And here to discuss this is Demetrius Minor. He is a youth minister, a motivational speaker, a political pundit, and the author of Preservation and Purpose. It is a pleasure to have you on with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well.
Well, thank you, and to you and your family. Now, explain to our audience, why are you in particular outraged at the president's executive amnesty?
Well, first of all, I want to retract here and let's press the rewind button. And we all remember or can recall when the president promised that he's not a dictator and that he cannot make laws without the consent of Congress. And he promised to go that route, and he didn't do it. Also, I'm a little disturbed by the timing of this all. I believe the president was going to wait until the end of December to make a decision on how to go forward. And then all of a sudden, he seemed to rush his decision without giving Congress time to debate it, to talk about it, and to implement some comprehensive reform. And then also, this sends a very bad message to the newly elected members of Congress that will be sworn in January of 2015, that there is a president who's willing to do things unilaterally, then to respect the separation of powers. So I believe that this sends the wrong signal in multiple ways. I do not know the answer to immigration reform. I know for many it's a very emotional issue. It's a very personal issue. I do think that the number one thing the United States should be concerned with is securing the borders. And I believe that the president should have listened to officials in the border states, in particular Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, those people who have a first-hand view of the crisis that is happening on the borders. I believe that he should have listened to them intently and tried to implement their ideas and their suggestions on how to secure the border and how to have the immigration process operate more smoothly and more effectively. And I pretty much think that should be one of the many ways that we can solve this crisis.
Right. Now, all your points are spot on. They are exactly right. I've made many of the same points myself. I want to ask you, though, in particular, what is the reaction amongst the Black community that you either speak to or deal with or familiar with? There was a piece on Drudge where there was a long list of Black activists who were speaking out against this executive amnesty, feeling a sense that this is going to really harm the African-American low-wage worker. It's also a betrayal of their best interests. Can you speak to us particularly on that issue?
Absolutely. I concur 100%. I think my dear friend Stacey Washington, who's also a colleague of mine, I think she said it best when she talked about every time this country has pardoned illegal immigrants, for some reason crime and Black unemployment seems to rise. And she talked about how that happened when Ronald Reagan implemented an amnesty package back in the 80s. And so she talked about the betrayal that, of course, the Democrat Party claims to be the party of minorities, which is not true. So now they're catering to a certain group of people who are not entering the country the right way. And it's not that we are against immigration, because there's plenty of people who have come to the United States, but they've done the process lawfully. They obeyed the laws of the land. They took whatever time was needed to make sure that they had everything in order to become a law-abiding citizen. So it's not just the Black community that's being betrayed, but it's any immigrant that has done things the right way. They are seeing their hard work and their labor be in vain, because now you have a president that's granting amnesty to what he says is only going to be 5 million. But I think me and you both know that number is going to be much higher when it's all said and done.
Yes, it will, especially since the possibility for fraud here is going to be tremendous. I mean, there's all kinds of people who are going to create documents that try to match the criteria that the president is laying out. So it's going to be far greater than the 4 to 5 million that he says. And right now we have Black unemployment is in double digits. It is generally double even what whites face. And here the president is going to actually flood low-wage jobs with these illegals who now can compete with those who are already struggling.
Well, Doctor, it adds to the frustration among the African-American community. Many African-Americans looked at Barack Obama as an iconic figure, the first Black president, and with them resonated hope and a desire for change. And the opposite has occurred, unfortunately. Not only is there a high unemployment rate within the Black community, but you've also seen racial divisions and racial tensions. For example, Ferguson, which is a very unfortunate case that many Americans are aware of. So it's not just unemployment; it's just on a social scale, on a mental scale as well. You saw low turnout among African Americans in this previous election cycle. They are not pleased; they are not satisfied with the president's policies. So, if anything else, this is just putting another bitter taste in their mouth as far as his presidency is concerned.
Do you think
whoever the next presidential candidate may be?
Right. Do you think that the judgment of this man for violating the Constitution?
I don't think so. And the reason being is because even though some Blacks may be frustrated, there's still that emotional attachment to Barack Obama being the first person of color to occupy the Oval Office. And while many of them are frustrated and reluctant to speak out against it, because of fear of backlash. So they'll be even more hesitant to support an impeachment process against Obama.
Right. So you think that if the Republicans should go forward to that extent, and nobody right now is talking about that except a few pundits like myself. So basically the Republicans are saying that all options are on the table, but they're not willing to take. What I'm arguing is if you call a man an emperor and a monarch and he's violating the Constitution to that extent, you have a duty to impeach him. But what they're afraid of is, as you say, that they're never going to get African-American support on this, and that as a result, there's going to be, if they go down that road, there could be rioting, there could be violence, or there could just be a huge backlash against them. And you concur that then that would be an unwise course of action, in your view?
I think the Republican Party is slowly making gains towards the African American community, and that's due to multiple things. It's due to the ineptness of President Obama, and it's also due to the Republican Party finally figuring out how to do an effective ground game and outreach in some areas. And I think if they were to pursue with impeachment process, it will offset those gains.
Right.
Unless there is something very valuable and something very convicting that Black Americans will have no choice but to embrace the facts. I don't really see anything going forward with the impeachment. Also, if they was to go forward with that, due to litigations and due to the courts and how drawn out that process would be, it will be almost time for his term to end by the time those talks will get anywhere. So
you think it would do a lot more harm than good, essentially, to go down that road?
I think so.
Now, let me ask you about your own personal journey. How did you come to your critical stance of the Democratic Party? How did that happen for you personally?
Sure, absolutely. It was right before the 2000 elections, and my godfather, who also happens to be my pastor, Bishop Sammy Conyers, I remember him telling me in Maryland, Demetrius, just because you're Black does not mean you have to vote Democrat. And then I began to reminisce on my family traditions of voting Democrat, and I didn't know why they did it. And so I just did my research for myself, and I saw how I stood on social issues, seeing that I am a minister and that those issues mean the most to me. And I began to realize that my belief system, my principles, my values aligned itself more with the platform of the Republican Party, and that's how I became conservative.
Awesome. And did you get some pushback from family members, friends, and relatives, or did they simply accept your free-thinking ways?
Of course, there's always going to be that initial pushback. I was told that I was too young to know about history and that I was being duped and that I was being brainwashed. But I became confident in my own research and my own study and my own beliefs and in my own independent thinking. And that's why I am where I am today.
And do you currently have an impact on the youth that you cater to regarding showing them that their values align more with the Republican platform than the Democrat?
I certainly hope so. For example, a Republican governor here in the state of Georgia and the Republican-elect Senator David Perdue visited our church, which is a predominantly Black church. And I've had some of the Black congregate members come up to me and say, I'm going to vote for him because he showed up. And to me, it's just that simple. Whether it's, we may not be able to convince or compel a huge numerical amount of voters at one time, but if you can convince one voter, I believe you've made a difference.
That is
so I try to offer an alternative perspective.
Beautiful.
Very
refreshing interview. Thank you so much for being with us. You have been listening to Demetrius Minor, a youth minister, a motivational speaker, the author of Preservation and Purpose. You can get more information at demetriusspeaks.com or balcony7.com. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Minor. And you have also been listening to Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. As every week, we uphold values that will never die.
Been so unfaithful. Now sadly I know why.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I'm the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Well, during the midterms, we had a new initiative launched in the very liberal state of Washington. 59% of voters enacted universal background checks. And yet, we have been told by the media that background checks are what the overwhelming majority of the American people want. This statistic, though, this 59% of votes, shows us that actually many less Americans want background checks than we've been led to believe. Here to discuss this issue is the Executive Director of Gun Owners of America, Mr. Larry Pratt. Welcome to the show, sir. Hello, Mr. Pratt?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, welcome to the broadcast. So, you believe that this background check that's been enacted in the liberal state of Washington is obviously going to be a dismal failure in order to reduce crime rates. Can you explain that to the audience?
Well, we've got quite an experience with background checks nationally. In the last year of record, they did some 11 million, and there were maybe 40 prosecutions out of that 11 million and 14 convictions. That's an awful lot of police time spent on doing essentially nothing. It doesn't get guns out of the wrong hands, which is the main selling slogan of the background check. It's just not been effective. They can say, well, some people get denied and therefore they don't get to buy the gun. And that makes the happy assumption that somehow if a denial at a store, sorry, pal, your background check wasn't cleared, maybe the guy had a fist fight in a bar when he was in the Army, that doesn't mean if he's a criminal that he's not going to get a gun. It just means he got turned down at the store. So they've put a big happy face on the utility of background checks, and it's not really a very good selling point after all.
Yeah, let me play devil's advocate for one moment. Let me ask you this. Okay, so if you make the argument, which I believe you are right, if somebody is denied because the background doesn't check out, they'll go somewhere else. They'll find the gun in the black market. But what about to those who say, well, what harm does it do? I mean, you've now made it at least a little bit difficult.
Getting to that.
Oh, sorry.
I'm glad you asked that. The harm is in our post-National Security Agency scandal age, we know that the government breaks its own law regularly and often. Federal law prohibits it from keeping information in the background check for over 24 hours. And yet they've made agreements with scholars to do longitudinal studies of the background check data. Huh? How do you do a longitudinal test or study on something that's been destroyed in the first 24 hours? We know that the government wants information. If they want to keep Aunt Susie's conversation with Aunt Mary, I do think they would even put a higher priority on keeping the guns that you and I buy. That's just the nature of the way these folks seem to operate. And so we know we can't trust them, and we're making a serious error giving them this kind of information, because this information, not being useful to crime solving, means that they can use it for control purposes at such time as they go rogue.
Right. Well, okay, let me ask you this. When a background check is conducted, it means what exactly? It means that then there's a record of a gun owner. A gun owner's record is known. That's what you're saying is the problem?
We're certain they're going to keep that information in spite of a prohibition in federal law, just like they were prohibited in federal law from recording NSA, having NSA do snooping on domestic phone calls, let alone keeping a recording, which it now turns out they did. These folks do not keep the law, and we make a serious error in giving them information that they can abuse.
Right.
They have not earned our trust.
Do you expect that this ballot initiative is going to be taken up by other states?
I suspect it will be. Somebody like Bloomberg will come in with his rather unlimited funds, and he will work to get a measure up as an initiative. And then the challenge to the pro-Second Amendment forces are to explain in 30 seconds what you've given me the liberty of some 6 or 7 minutes to put forth. That's a tough sell.
Yes, it is a tough sell because I think that I think everybody's first reaction would have been like my first reaction on this broadcast was, well, what's the harm in doing that? You're just going to add one small layer of protection. But you're quite right. We have an intrusive state, and a state power that is condensed is usually abused, and we're seeing the power that is concentrated in the manner that it is today. That power is increasing by the minute, and it's increasingly abused. So I completely concur.
In somewhat related fashion, we found out from Mr. Gruber's that they lied like a rug to get the Obamacare legislation through, and that legislation opened the door to more invasion of more gun owner privacy by getting at their psychiatric records, and they're using records that have nothing to do with violent behavior as a basis for disqualifying gun ownership.
Indeed. Now, you list here in a little excerpt that I'm reading that the majority of law enforcement officers are actually opposed to gun control. Can you explain why that is?
One of the police groups in Washington State came out and actively campaigned against this because they realized that this is not workable. What this is going to do, the way it's written in Washington State, if I'm out hunting with one of my kids and I say, hey, hold on to my gun for a minute, I'm going to go and take care of my needs. And 5 minutes later I'm back, and okay, give me the gun. Well, we've just committed, both of us, felonious acts. That's the way that law is written. Terrible.
Right, indeed.
There are going to be more inadvertent criminals, and frankly, I don't know that that's going to be altogether disappointing to those that don't like the American people having widespread firearms ownership. They have been looking for years and years for ways that they can disqualify Americans from owning guns. Under George Bush in 2008, I believe it was, we had a fight over a measure we called the Veterans Disarmament Act. And basically it was the precursor of Obamacare. And so all of the psychiatric records from the Veterans Administration, and we know what their tender mercies are like, were made accessible to the FBI for the background checks, and they began zapping veterans who had maybe a PTSD diagnosis, which 98% of the time has nothing to do with violent behavior. But it was good enough to disqualify somebody from gun ownership.
Indeed. Now, tell me about how you initially founded the Gun Owners of America. What inspired you to found this organization? And tell me about the nature of the activities that you're currently involved with.
Well, actually, credit for the founding goes to a California State Senator, H.L. Richardson. But since he was in California, he needed somebody to operate our lobbying operation in Washington. And so that's how I came to be the first on board. And I thought this was a magnificent opportunity because even the NRA had not yet organized a lobbying entity, which they now have, the Institute for Legislative Action. But we had, by that time, seen 2 U.S. senators go down in flames over the firearms issue, one in Maryland, one in Pennsylvania. And it was evidence to me that even unorganized, just getting the word through the news, the gun issue was very potent, and it would be an excellent vehicle for the defense of all of our liberties, basically, because we look at the Bill of Rights as something that's interwoven, and you can't just pick and choose which of the amendments you're going to support and discard the rest. And so we, from that early point, realized that this was a great way to defend liberty, certainly firearms, in this country.
Do you work currently with the NRA, and how does your organization differ from theirs?
Well, there are times when we unhappily have to disagree with them. There was the legislation introduced after Newtown that was going to expand the background check at the federal level. And we said, no. This thing has not, well, we've already gone through the whole set of arguments why it's not a good idea. The NRA had come up with background check initially as a way of blocking a waiting period, which we thought was, while it's unconstitutional, it was less dangerous than giving our data to the government. So we were opposing the expansion that Senators Toomey and Manchin had introduced. The NRA was supporting it. And happily, when we had enough evidence from people on the Hill that they were indeed going from office to office in support of expanding the background check, we put out an alert. And we said to the folks on our email list, if you're an NRA member, then call this guy at this number and ask him to urge the powers that be to publicly oppose this Toomey-Manchin legislation. A week later, the NRA did. Manchin was beside himself. He accused them of having betrayed him, of having done a 180, and it was the grassroots. And by the way, that email list was as robust as it was, thanks in some considerable measure to Piers Morgan, because when I had appeared on his show and he behaved like such a jerk, the result on our server was it crashed 3 times, people signing up to get our email alerts.
Yes, I commend you on that performance. That was brilliant. That was mind-boggling.
Well, thank you. It was what defeated the very thing that Piers Morgan supported. So if we want to congratulate the author of that legislative outcome, Piers Morgan, I'm standing and saluting you right now.
Well, it's evident that you do awesome work, and I applaud you for everything that you do. I hope that you are successful in curtailing this desire by so many folks to expand background checks. I agree with you. What it will do is just give the government more power and influence over us. It's just another grab from our big government, whose appetite is insatiable, it appears.
It does appear.
Thank you so much for being on the show. That was the Executive Director of Gun Owners of America, Mr. Larry Pratt. You can check out their website, gunownersofamerica.com. .org, gunowners.org. And you'll get lots of information about their crusades on that website, gunowners.org. This is Dr. Gray's upholding values that never die.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Welcome back to our special Thanksgiving edition of American Heartland. And we know that lots of you have time off and you have time to catch up on your favorite movies. Well, that's what I want to talk about today. You know that I'm generally quite a critic of American culture, but there are some real gems out there. Gems that I have watched with great passion and interest and intensity, and I want to share some of that with you. And I also want to point out how these, they're basically television series. These television series that we're going to discuss today, they're not just artistically remarkable, but they also have conservative themes too. And so you can enjoy them and also feel satisfied that they're generally reinforcing our traditional worldview. So they're artistically gorgeous, well done, captivating, but also sound in terms of the themes that they are transmitting. Here to discuss this is Loredana Vuoto. She is the senior news writer and editor at Alliance Defending Freedom. She has written countless articles on American culture. And yes, she is my brilliant younger sister. Lori, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Lori and I are banding about ideas of how to have a regular segment on Hollywood, because she's really an expert on it, and she comes at that expertise with a conservative perspective. So she not only knows the culture, but she understands how to analyze it from our values. Lori, tell us. Give us some couple of recommendations, some television series that the audience out there should enjoy during the Thanksgiving break and perhaps even during the Christmas holidays.
Well, if you haven't seen any of these, you definitely must see them. Breaking Bad was one of the most watched television shows of all time. Even in 2014, the Guinness Book of World Records actually rated it the most watched TV series ever.
Yes, and Laurie, you're the one that turned me on to it. And the minute I started to watch it, I was completely hooked. The premise is you have a chemistry teacher who gets a diagnosis that he's dying of cancer, and he decides that, very unorthodox reaction, he's going to become a drug kingpin in order to leave his family a substantial legacy.
And what's really remarkable about the program is that you have this, unlike most TV series, you don't just have a protagonist. The creator of the show, Vince Gilligan, who was a writer for the X-Files for many years, he wanted to create a character who becomes an antagonist. So here you have this humdrum chemistry teacher who's undergoing now a middle-age crisis, and he's struggling with now this life sentence, this death sentence of cancer, and he's got to figure out how is he going to provide for his family, and what is he going to do? And he somehow gets entangled in this life of crime by producing meth and selling drugs, and becomes this drug lord.
That's right. And I think what's really remarkable about the series is over and over again, there's a contrast between his idyllic family life, his interaction with his son, his interaction with his newborn baby girl, Holly, his interaction with his sister-in-law and his brother-in-law who works at the DEA. His name is Hank. He becomes a very central figure. And throughout the series, you see that at the very beginning, even though this man is diagnosed with cancer, he has everything. He has everything a man should want because he has family harmony, and he has a family that admires him for his moral characters, even the moral virtues, even though he's not successful in the world, right? Even though he's not a big earner. And so yes, in order to pursue wealth and a legacy that he wants to give his family, we see that he slowly destroys his family. And that is what's truly remarkable, the contrast between the idyllic setting and what he creates. He thinks he's helping his family, but he's really doing the opposite.
And what's also really remarkable about this series is that it shows every step of the way that actions have consequences. There's always a choice that the characters can make. They could either choose good or evil. And when they end up choosing evil, there are clear consequences, even if the motives are good. And initially, you could, he's Bryan Cranston, who plays Walter White. He tries to justify his actions by saying, well, I'm doing this for the greater good of my family. But is selling drugs and killing people really, really justifiable for what you're doing? Does the end justify the means? No.
Exactly. And then you also see that he thinks he can embark in a life of crime temporarily. And then you see that one ill deed begets another and another and another. And it takes you into the entire world of drug dealing, really from the perspective of a guy that was a regular, normal husband and father living in the suburbs. And so it resonates with all of us, say, living in the suburbs that don't have too much interaction with the life of crime, because we learn about the life of crime as he learns about it. And he finds it harder and harder to stop the cycle of violence and also greed that penetrates his soul.
Yes, and then he actually becomes enticed by it, and he actually ends up enjoying it and finding it very, very alluring. So you really see his downfall from a good man, a good family man, to this evil kingpin.
Right. Brilliant acting, brilliant writing, brilliant directing. I mean, it's astonishing on so many levels, worth seeing time and again. So, Loredana, what else can you recommend apart from Breaking Bad, which I believe is a series, 5 series? Well, the 5th series is divided into 2, so it's a lot of watching if you want to go from the beginning to the end. But the minute you start, I challenge you, you won't be able to put that series down.
Yeah, you definitely won't be able to stop. And so we all miss it. We wish it was still on the air, but unfortunately it's not. Another series that is no longer on the air but was a real gem, and I only began to be turned on to it after it was off the air, and it also had 5 seasons, but this is Damages, and it's an American legal thriller starring Glenn Close and Rose Byrne. And Glenn Close, she plays a ruthless lawyer who heads her own law firm, and she takes under her wing a protege, this law school graduate student named Ellen. And it's basically, it's got so many twists and turns, and it's brilliantly done. And you see how Ellen struggles with wanting to be this career woman or choosing to maintain a balanced life where she's engaged with this man and maybe potentially have a family, or climbing up the corporate ladder and becoming like Patty. And there's so many twists and turns. It's really, really very, very brilliantly done.
The dialogue and the characterization and the acting is absolutely outstanding. I think it is Glenn Close's best performance as Patty. And what we see here is a woman who decides that she's going to do everything that it takes in order to be successful in the world, whatever it takes to maintain her position. And as a result of that pursuit, she gives up a lot of her womanhood. And that's why I think it appeals to those of us who uphold traditional values, because you see that she makes a choice which the whole series, it leaves it a little bit ambiguous. On the one hand, you see this woman acting brilliantly and so capably at her job, which leads us to admire her. But on the other hand, we also witness to the tremendous void in her soul, in her heart, because she gave up family life. She gave up being a mother. She made the ultimate sacrifice in order to rise, go all the way up the corporate ladder.
And the show actually really champions motherhood, because it shows you the damage she has wreaked on her son's life. She has a torturous relationship with him, and he cannot despise her. And there are flashbacks. Patty constantly has flashbacks about when she was pregnant, when she was early on in her career, and the doctor told her to stay in bed, and if she didn't stay in bed, she would lose the child and have a miscarriage. And throughout the series, you constantly see her looking back to that time, and she purposely got out of bed and induced a miscarriage. So she's haunted by that because she had a choice, and it really has shaped her character, and her personal life is in shambles, and she's even divorced. She has no personal relationships with any family members. And as you said, she's this brilliant career woman, but she's very alone and sad.
And then the question of the series is, what is her protege going to do? What choices is her young protege going to make? So her young protege represents the next generation, those who, well, they benefit from all the advantages that the feminists, all the barriers that the feminists broke. So she benefits from all that because her trajectory is easier, and it's easier for her to be in love, to consider motherhood. But what choice is that second generation going to make? And her protege really represents all of the conflicting questions that the next generation of women have as they rise up the corporate ladder.
Yes, I totally agree, and it's a must see, and it's very well done in that it's done. The narrative is not done in a linear form, so the story constantly shifts between the past and the present, and so you're always on the edge of your seat trying to figure out what's happening and what decisions are these characters going to make.
Exactly, and the backdrop are some of the greatest legal battles of our time, and I think one of the most brilliant is the third series contains the story of Madoff, the Madoff family. So this personal drama of Patty and her protege is also, there's another layer where we are experiencing or exploring some of the greatest legal battles of our time. The Madoff family crisis, it's done with such good taste, and some of the scenes are memorable. As Lori knows, after season 3, I couldn't watch anymore. I was emotionally exhausted. And she's been trying to get me to watch season 4 and 5. But once you see season 3, you'll know what I mean. Because there's a key character. Something happens to a key character, and I just cannot get over what happens to
them. Don't give it away.
Don't give it away
for all of those who want to see it.
Well, Lori, I know that you are a fountain of information and wisdom and great analysis when it comes to our culture. We're going to be sure to have you on frequently. I know that there's more you have to share with us. There is, I believe, one more, Homeland, which you highly recommend.
I absolutely highly recommend Homeland, and it is currently in its 4th season on Showtime. So I strongly recommend that you start from the beginning and then catch up. But Homeland is an American political thriller, and it was actually developed by Howard Gordon and Alex Gansa, the people that actually worked on 24. So all of you who are big fans of the show 24, you'll definitely want to see Homeland. And It basically is about a CIA agent who suffers from bipolar disorder, and one of her assets tells her that while she was working in Iraq, that a U.S. Marine who was a prisoner of war has been turned by Al Qaeda. So it stars Claire Danes as Carrie Matheson, the CIA agent, and the U.S. Marine is Nicholas Brody. And when the U.S. Marine is actually found and brought back to the United States, Carrie begins to think that maybe this is the U.S. Marine who's been turned by Al Qaeda. So it's brilliantly done, and the acting is superb, and it's won numerous awards, and I highly recommend it.
Yes, and I think, too, it takes you into the tremendous pain and difficulty that our returning soldiers experience, especially if they've been prisoners of war. It really shows you how hard it is for them to readjust to civilian life, how alienated they are from their own family, and how alienated their family is from them. So it really gives you a sympathetic portrait of the agony of the returning soldier, and especially the agony of a prisoner of war. It's a series that is politically incorrect, too, at least the first seasons that I saw. And I love that aspect of it, as you see little glimpses of how hard it is for those who are trying to defend our liberties to do so, both in the United States and abroad.
Some critics have panned it that it portrays Muslims as very simplistic, and that it creates this, Islamophobic attitude, and that this fear, it fans this frenzy that all Muslims want to infiltrate America and kill us. But I think that's totally wrong, and it basically really shows you, as you said, you see this Marine coming back, and it delves into
the reality that our Homeland Security team has to deal with, which is that there are these threats, and there is a profile. Sorry. All right. Thank you, Lori, the senior news writer and editor at Alliance Defending Freedom, our culture critic here on American Heartland. Thank you. That's some Thanksgiving viewing, some holiday viewing. We hope you enjoy those recommendations. You've been listening to Dr. Grace, upholding values that never die.
Hard work pays off the way it should. Yeah, I've seen enough to know that we've got it good.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Shut up, just shut up, shut up, shut up, just shut up, shut up, shut up, just shut up, shut up, shut it up, just shut up, shut up, just shut up, shut up, shut up, just shut up, shut up, shut up, just shut up, shut up, shut it up, just shut up, shut up. We try to take it slow, but we're still losing control.
Welcome. This is Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Every week we look around and we ask the question, who deserves to be told to just shut up? Well, there is a new artist. Her name is Tove Lo. She's got the #1 video 2 weeks in a row. It's called Habits. And I believe that this woman really deserves to be told to just shut up. It is actually a very good song. The song is the heartbreak of losing somebody. And this woman is so heartbroken in her loss that she wants to be out of the house all the time in order to fill the void in her heart and soul. She wants to go outside and party all the time in order to overcome the tremendous grief that she feels. The song doesn't tell us why this person is lost to her. Is it simply a breakup, or is the person that she loves deceased? We don't know the answer to that question. But it captures very well the emotion of wanting to escape the tremendous pain of losing someone that is dear to you in your life. Now, those of you who have broken up with somebody or even lost a friend or experienced any kind of mourning, you will sympathize with the lyrics. They are really heart-wrenching. So I give her kudos halfway. However, the problem is the actual video. The video shows a woman that immerses herself totally, utterly, and completely in a life of hedonism. The video shows a young girl who goes out on the town and she can't stop binge drinking. She goes out on the town and she can't stop smoking pot. And then what I think are amongst the most disturbing images of all is you see that she is having sexual relations indiscriminately. She has sex with strangers. She kisses several women. She kisses several men, boys, randomly. And then you see some scenes where all this kissing takes place all at once. So it is almost like an orgy, random people. So she's giving her own sexual favors to anybody and everybody that comes along. And we basically get a window into a completely degenerate lifestyle. And in order to compensate, in order to try to make amends for the tremendous pain that she feels, what does she choose to do? She chooses self-destruction. Now, I think this video sends a terrible message to the youth. We do see a woman that is completely degenerate and lost. So I can't say that this video really glamorizes the life. But I do think there's an element there that justifies that choice when you lose somebody, that makes it a little bit appealing, that makes it a little bit chic. And that's where I take issue with this video. I think from a female empowerment point of view, it really sends the wrong message. If, for example, you just broke up with your boyfriend or your husband has left you or you've decided for whatever reason to mutually part ways, it doesn't show strength in how you deal with that pain and that loss. Why not show somebody dealing with the pain and the loss, but then finding a way to overcome it? All we see in this video is one tremendous abyss, one long descent into self-destructive behavior. And what message is that really sending to a young woman? Is that if you experience some kind of a loss, let that loss totally dominate, define your life to the point that you destroy yourself. Is that the message that we really want to send our young women about how to overcome the pain of loss? Instead, we should teach our young women that if somebody rejects you or if you break up, no matter how painful that is, still your value, your sense of self-worth should remain high. And you should understand that that is just an element of incompatibility. And you should moreover understand that you never, ever, 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 ever give anybody the power to define you, the power to define how you deal with losing them, the power to totally destroy you just because they have chosen somebody else over you. That is not female strength. That is nothing to admire. That is wallowing in self-pity, in self-loathing, and it is totally unproductive. What message are we sending our young women? That if you break up, destroy yourself, and instead of having one problem, you'll end up with 2 or 3 or 4 problems. You'll still end up with the problem of the loss of the person that you love, and now you have other problems, perhaps drug addiction, perhaps alcoholism, and perhaps a couple of STDs from all this crazy promiscuity that you're indulging in order to quote-unquote numb the pain. So I think that this artist is really sending the wrong message to our youth. Why not have a video where, yes, we get you. Breaking up or losing somebody is extremely painful. But show us how we can all surmount that pain, learn something from that pain, be stronger as a result of that pain, and then define ourselves not merely by the loss, but by what we have created to take the place of that loss. I have said this to myself in moments of tremendous loss. When one dream dies, start to dream another dream. I've experienced tremendous loss, losing dear friends, losing people that I love. Often along with that comes the loss of a key dream that I had about myself. And I try as much as possible to overcome that sense of loss by dreaming a new dream. I think the artists today, they do a very good job of showing the tremendous pain that we might feel, the variety of emotions, the complexity of the pain that we might feel. but a really, really bad job of showing us, well, how do you make that pain productive, constructive? How do you make that pain an element of your own life story, which is based on strength and overcoming, not just wallowing in a sea of self-pity and self-destructive behavior? So to that video habits, just shut up. And now to the mailbag. This is also one of my favorite segments of the show, where we go to the mailbag and respond to your letters. You can write to us, valuesthatneverdie@hotmail.com, valuesthatneverdie@hotmail.com. The first letter from Natalia, Chicago, Illinois. Dr. Grace, loved your segment on impeachment, but the Republicans will never, ever do it. You know, Natalia, the Republicans right now are saying that they're going to, quote unquote, weigh all options. It's my job to tell them what they should do. And it's all of our job to give them the strength to do what they should do. And why am I so adamant on this point? The President of the United States has basically taken a large body of individuals, 11 million illegals who have broken American laws. And how does he deal with that? He breaks constitutional laws in order to bend over backward to accommodate these illegals. If we don't take a stand against this, as I write in my latest piece, then the nation is going to descend into chaos. One element of law breaking is begetting a whole lot more law breaking. And Republicans have got to rise against this and not try to play God. They don't know how all of this will unfold. And I am arguing that even if we don't convict in the Senate, it is well worth doing to get that record of impeachment in the House, because at least we are standing for what is just, and future generations will see that there is an alternative to merely a president who breaks laws with impunity. We've got a letter from Emily. Emily in Greensboro, North Carolina. Dr. Grace, Raheel Raza is a woman of exceptional courage. Can you feature more moderate Muslims on your program? This is a reference to that remarkable woman we had on last week, Raheel Raza, who is trying to get the Muslim faith to be reformed, especially to allow for women to fulfill their God-given talents. And you betcha, Emily, I want to reach out to those moderate Muslims and get their voices on the air. And hopefully, over time, they can help Muslim women to be empowered within their own faith. I'm of the persuasion, if God has given you a set of talents, whether you're male or female, black, purple, brown, whatever the case may be, your talents are meant to be used and fulfilled, and anybody that tells you different is wrong. Now, Matt from Concord, New Hampshire. Dr. Grace, you have not discussed Ferguson. Why not? Well, that's extremely perceptive, Matt. You will notice that when there's a lot of when there are these stories that break, that everybody's talking about, that deal with race relations, I tend to mention them minimally, if not at all. And why is that? I think, to be honest with you, so many of these stories are matters of specific crime, committed or not committed. The analysis and the judgment of it belongs in the hands of the jury that is assessing, that has the ability to assess all of the evidence before them. And I think a lot of the commentary feeds into the racial divisions amongst us. I'm going to suggest something really radical. I think if we ignore a lot of these race stories, we're actually going to see greater racial harmony. I know that sounds unorthodox, and I know that to some extent the news media has to feature them, especially if there's a riot. Of course we have to feature them. But I object to this constant, incessant coverage of these stories, and I don't want to be part of that, because I think race is one of those issues, a lot of the emotions are irrational, and you really can't talk your way out of this. It is something that over time, as circumstances change for Black people in this country, those emotions will subside. And I think the less we feed into the media frenzy of this race talk, the better it is for all. So my point of view is, of course, we've got to mention them, but try to mention these stories minimally, if at all. And finally, we got one more letter. John from Nashville, Tennessee. Dr. Grace, Blacks will never, ever support impeachment, so we're not going to be able to do that. Don't play God, John. We don't know what happens. And like I say again and again on my show, do your part and let God do his. That's all we can ask each and every one of us to do, and none of us knows the future. You're listening to Dr. Grace, upholding values that never die. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, and we'll be right back.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.